I want to start this out with the story because I want you guys to understand where the place that we have to be, the place that I believe we have to be in order to truly change the culture around us, specifically in the workplace. So what is the purpose of this thing? The purpose of this thing is to reteach self-awareness, accountability, to produce company-wide empathy. And that is a very important concept, company-wide empathy. Because what we ultimately want is we want to have effective communication. And I believe that those things all lead up to effective communication. And ineffective communication within any organization is the Achilles heel, in my opinion. But how do we get there? Well, we first have to deal with ourselves. So I'm going to take you on a journey, and I want you to just kind of picture and feel this story, because I want you at some point to take yourself to this place, because this goes beyond just who you are as an employee, as an employer, as an entrepreneur. This goes beyond that. It goes back into your neural pathways and the way that you think. May 24th, 2015. It started out like a lot of Sundays that I had when I was in my early to mid 20s, just finding my way through the city. I had a hangover, guys. Lighten up. I had a hangover. I was a young guy. I had a hangover, had a great night before. I went to a Future concert, and I had the time of my life. It was literally a night that I will never forget. And I know that I'm pretty sure you guys have had that type of night. I had a great night. And so the following Sunday, I had a hangover. That means, for people who have never, indulged in that type of behavior, I don't condone it, right? That means that I had a headache. I was tired. I just didn't want to do anything. I wake up, and my dad, who at this point, I told you, the dynamic has shifted. Now we are living in a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm the primary caregiver at this point, and the dynamic of the relationship has shifted. And so my dad asked me for my car. Normally, at this point, I had learned how to say no to my father. It was a very hard thing for me to start to do with my dad. He's my dad. There's a dynamic, but I had learned how to say no. But I had gotten tired of saying yes, and then I wouldn't see my car for the entire day. So I normally would say no, but this particular morning I said yes. And he asked me, well, later on, I have an event that I want you to come with me to. And I said, you know what, Dad? Yes, I'll come with you, man. Because we hadn't gone anywhere in a while. And he said, yeah, let's go. And I said, okay, that's cool. Let's do that. He said, okay. And he left. He took my car. I went to sleep. I slept like a rock. I mean, I don't know what was going on, but I slept like a rock. And what woke me up was a phone call. I answered my phone, and the person on the other end of the phone, he says, hey, good morning. Do you know Ibrahim Nawagi? I said, yes, this is he. How can I help you? He pauses for a moment, and then he says, are you a junior? I said, yes, my father's name is Ibrahim Nawagi as well. I'm thinking it may be like a bill collector or something, right? And he says, okay, well, we have your father here. He was at a hospital up the street from where we lived. And then he began to explain to me that from what he felt, my father had a heart attack. And just from him just looking at it from without doing any type of research, he felt like my father had a heart attack. And so that's when I perked up and I started to put my clothes on. And I'm getting ready, and I'm like, okay, well, look, man, where are you at? And he tells me where he is, and then, but he's still talking, and I'm listening, but I'm just gathering my things. I have him on speakerphone, and he begins to tell me that, yeah, so your father, you know, he got here to the emergency room, and he collapsed in front of the emergency room, and he stopped breathing, and with we try to revive him and get him to back, breathing, and unfortunately we couldn't get him breathing again, and so I pause, and now I'm hearing him, and I say, wait a minute, what? And he says, your father, he passed away, we couldn't save him. And I yell, what? And then I drop my phone, and at that point, and this is the space that I'm at, where I first became self-aware. And that's what I want you guys to understand, is that in this space, I learned and I thought about, it's almost like my life and my relationship and my time with my father had flashed before me. I immediately understood that I was alone, and not alone as in support, because I have a family and I have friends, I have extended family, but I was alone in a person who completely understood me because he was me. And then I also realized that the things that I was either resentful about or upset about with my father, they immediately did not matter. There was no one there to blame. There was no one there to lean on. It was just me and the information that I had just received. And it was at that point that I became self-aware. I began to look at myself and all of the things that I brought to the situation that was already a pretty terrible situation. I brought more negativity because of my need to project. I had to take a deep look at myself, and this is where we will begin, because I need you guys to be able to take a deep look at yourselves, and in hopes that we can change our thought process and our triggers, and we can take our lives to the next level. But it starts with yourself. Now, what I have here is the definition of self-awareness. Now, this is what Webster says: knowledge and awareness of one's own personality and character. So it doesn't deal with your circumstances. It doesn't deal with situations that you've endured. It doesn't deal with anything that you've accomplished. This is you stripped down, you looking at who you are as a person, who you've become as a person. And that is it. That is what self-awareness is. Now, I love this meme, right? Every time I see this meme, there's always something witty or funny attached to it, right? But the reality is, in real life, this is very hard to do. This is extremely hard to do. And that's why most people don't get over this hump. We can attack everything else. You have people that are subject matter experts in everything else other than who you are and the attitude that you bring to situations, whether it's negative or positive. This is the barrier for most people, specifically in the workplace, where they don't understand why they can't push their business or their team or their vendors, whoever. They can't push them to the next level. It's because you can't deal with yourself. So we have to be able to look inward. We have to be able to look inward. So this is an interactive seminar. So I'm going to need you guys to do something. Okay, so it's time to work. Let's start working now. Let's get into the nitty gritty. You heard me talk. Let's get into the nitty gritty. So if you guys can see this slide, I want you guys to take out a small sticky note or rip a small corner off. No matter, it doesn't matter, as long as it's big enough to fit six numbers on it, and it's small enough to fit in a wallet. I don't want to get into your personal business. You might not have a wallet, but it needs to be small enough to where you can either fold it or or ball it up and keep it. Okay? I'm gonna give you a second to get that. Give you a quick second to get that. As I sip my liquid vibranium. Ah. Okay, so hopefully you were able to find a small sticky note or just a small corner. It doesn't matter. And you can just, even if you can't find that, just have it, have something there, and then you can find it and write it down later. But just, I need you to have that because it's important. Now, this may be hard for some people. This may be easy for some people. But if we want to do the work, we have to begin to unpack some of these things. So as I stated in my slide, I want you to think about a moment, okay, that may be similar to what I expressed when my father passed away. I want you to think about that, and I'll give you a minute to kind of think back. But I want you to think about a moment that, in that moment, well, I'll say this: before that moment, you were able to look at everybody else and all of the circumstances that were affecting you and how you were a victim in the matter and everything that went wrong and why it's not your fault. And then I want you to take that date, okay, of that thing that made you say, hey, now the noise has been silenced and I'm only here with myself. And who am I when I'm stripped down and there's nobody to blame, there's no situation to blame? Who am I on this level? That life-altering event. And I want you to write the date. I want you to write the date of that event on that small piece of paper. I want you to write the date of that event that happened. And this is the thing, it's a very unique time because that time may not last. You may just be in that place of self-awareness for a moment, and then you can go, and then you end up going back into blaming, and you end up going back into just projecting and all of the things that we do instead of looking at ourselves. If you are, if you can do that for me, I promise you it will be beneficial. Write that date down, okay? Because I want you to feel it. The way that I felt that story, I know the space that I was in. And I know that was the turning point for me as a man. It was almost like the changing of the guard. That was a journey that I had to begin on to become self-aware and to find myself doing the things I'm doing. So now that we have that, I want you to fold that piece of paper up and put it down for later. Like I said in the slide, fold it up, put it away, put it to the side, okay? Now that I've taken you to the depths of your soul, right? Early in the morning, I've taken you to that place so early. I want you, now we're gonna come out of that. Let's come to a happy place. Let's get out of that. Let's get out of that little funky place. It was tough. It was a terrible moment in our lives. Let's get out of it. Okay, let's now reflect. I want reflection in a different direction. I like little rhymes and stuff, right? So now what I want you to do, I want you to think about an accomplishment that made you happy. I want you to think about an accomplishment that made you happy, okay? Think about an accomplishment that made you happy. And what I want you to do is I want you to take a moment to say either to yourself or out loud, but I want you to hear you say it. I would prefer for you to say it out loud, right? And that's why I have everybody muted so it won't just sound like, a crazy choir or something, right? I want you to say that moment out loud. This is how I want you to say it. I want you to say, I accomplished this and it made me happy. I accomplished, insert whatever you accomplished, and it made me happy. Everybody, I accomplished whatever and it made me happy. And let's put some icing on the cake. Let's make ourselves feel really good. Let's make ourselves feel really, really great this morning because I took you to a dark place. I want you to feel really, really good this morning. I accomplished blank and it made me feel happy and I am responsible for it. Let's get some ownership on there. Let's put a little bit of ownership on there. Let's own this thing. You accomplished this thing and it made you happy. So I'll give you an example. I graduated, within the 4 years. And at that point, that was a big thing to me and that made me happy. And I'd like to believe that I'm responsible for it. Okay? This thing happened, made me happy. I'm responsible for it. Now, I'm sorry in advance, but all things in the universe must be balanced, right? So for balance's sake, I have to bring you back to maybe a space that makes you uncomfortable. But there's a theme, right? Because we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I want you to think about a situation completely out of your control, that made you angry. I want you to think about a situation that was completely out of your control that made you angry. I'll give you an example. During the fall of 2017, here in Houston, Hurricane Harvey forced me out of my living situation and it totaled both my and my wife's car. And though it was completely out of my control, it made me angry. I had to get on a boat with my wife and my at that point, my small baby. I just had one kid at that point, and it made me angry that happened to me. So I want you to think about a situation that was completely out of your control that made you angry. But of course, for balance's sake, right? Because we have to, if you do it in one instance, you got to do it in the other instance, right? For balance's sake, I want you to say that thing, this situation that was completely out of my control, blank, it made me angry. And I want you to add, and I'm responsible for it. Oh, that hurts, right? What type of, hey, that's what we have to do, right? We did it for the other one, we got to do it for this one. This situation that was completely out of my control, it made me angry, and I was responsible for it. I want you to say that. I want you to say that. I want you to say this situation that made me angry, and I'm responsible for it. It doesn't really feel right? Doesn't feel that good. So now you're at this point, you're like, Ibrahim, make it make sense, man. Make it make sense, man. In our personal lives, as well as within our careers, situations will present themselves that are completely out of our control. And the leaders amongst us are expected to deal with them as if we produce them, right? The leaders amongst us, and I would like to assume, and I'm not even going to assume, I'm going to say that the people that are on this webinar are leaders within their own right. Whether it doesn't matter if you're working for someone or you're running the entire corporation. The people that are on this webinar are leaders. So you know that the obvious answer is you want a certain outcome. And whether you produce the issue, if you want a certain end outcome, you have to check you have to become accountable for it, right? You have to become accountable for your responses. Now, this is where I want you to really pay attention to what I'm saying, right? You have to become accountable for your responses. Now let's think about the statements that I had you make. So the statements that I had you make was, the first one was, this thing happened, it made me happy, and I'm responsible for it. Then the second statement I had you make was, this thing happened, it made me angry, and I'm responsible for it. What am I charging you with? What am I charging you to be responsible for? I'm charging you to be responsible for, not for the situation itself, but for your response. And get this, your lingering attitude in response to the situation. So think about that. Situations happen, but the only responsibility that you have is to your reaction and your lingering attitude towards the situation. You are responsible for how you react, not the situation. That is very important. That's very important. Well, how do we do this? Well, if you recall, we already visited self-aware. So we have all of our mess out in the open. It's sitting there, right? Now it's ready. It's only gonna be there for a little while, right? It's almost like Cinderella and the glass slipper. It's only gonna be there for a little while before you find an excuse to bring it all back into yourself. But while we have all of our mess on the table, well, let's deal with it. Let's deal with it. So now we are self-aware. We know the type of attitudes that we bring to certain situations, but we know the circumstances that produce that. So the difference between the people who will go backwards and the people that will go forward is a word that I like to call, and everybody likes to call, accountability. Accountability. When I was a teacher, I had many names. When I was a teacher at the high school level, I coached track, and they used to call me Coach Mo. But then I also had trained my ninth graders to call me Mr. Accountability. I wanted to drill that in their head because that is the lesson that I wanted them to learn more than any English literature or whatever I was teaching them. I wanted them to learn how to be accountable. So I made them call me Mr. Accountability, not because I was so accountable, but I wanted that word to be in their heads every single day. I was just silly as a teacher. I mean, I'm just gonna let you know because I was young and I just had a lot of fun, but it was also stressful. But with my kids, I love the interaction with my kids, and I used to have them call me Mr. Accountability. So accountability, obviously, according to Webster, taking ownership of or personal responsibility for one's conduct, action, and outcomes. It does not say anything about taking responsibility of situations outside of your control. That's not accountability. Accountability is taking responsibility for your conduct and your actions. Now, what are some of the things that are the enemy of accountability, right? Because now, like, I want us to get through this thing without thinking about all of the reasons why. So I'm going to call them out, right? A lot of times, if we can call things out, then you won't feel comfortable using them. So let's look at some of the things that are the enemy of accountability. And hello, like I said, they used to call me Mr. Accountability, right? That's what my students used to call me. These knee-jerk reactions. Let's look at these knee-jerk reactions. The first thing that we like to do, especially if we're in a pressure situation, and also you think about it, if we are in a toxic culture that is not rooted in the principles that we're learning today, then we probably are scared to be honest, or we are scared to take responsibility because we think that we're going to lose our job, or we're going to be reprimanded. So the first thing that we do is we look externally first to figure out, who can I pin this on so I don't have to take responsibility and I don't have to be held accountable? Because a lot of times, like I said, in a toxic company culture, the management is ego driven and it's power driven, and you need a bit of pride and ego to be a leader, but you also need to have balance, right? But if it's if you're making your employees afraid to take accountability, when now you're cultivating a culture of secrecy. And you can't get to the next level if your people that's on the ground level, they don't feel like they can be honest with you. But we are going to supersede that, because guess what? We don't even want to be a part of a culture like that. So we are going to become the solution that we complain that we want. So we look externally first. A lot of times we project if you don't know what projection is, it's when someone is accusing you of something that you probably did, and you will try to get out in front of it and accuse them of it, but you don't have any evidence. You just don't want to be accused on your own, so you'll try to accuse them. We take on that victim mindset, and that, to me, above all, I don't know if anybody knows me and you know some of the things the things that I've done. One of my sayings was, you can't be a victim and a victor at the same time. It is literally impossible. If you are taking the stance of a victim, you cannot lead any type of initiative. You cannot lead any type of revolution. You can't be a leader and without shedding the victim mindset. And in the workplace, if you always take on the victim mindset, 9 times out of 10, you won't move up, because leaders are looking for people who will take initiative and take accountability, because that's who will be groomed to be the next wave of leaders, right? Not the person who is always saying that these things are happening to me. We have to become uncomfortable. This is something that makes you uncomfortable. Train, and let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And of course, the bottom one is we deflect, right? We deflect, we bring up something else that is really irrelevant to the situation to distract and maybe shift the attention to the fact that something else other than the fact that you were wrong in the situation. But these are all things that we have to identify so that we can become accountable. And we all know that, and this is just, me just talking in a very literal sense. Growing pains. We all understand that when you grow, it doesn't feel well, but it's necessary. You can't grow without growing pains. And looking inward and holding yourself accountable for the negativity that you bring to a situation that may already be negative. That's the thing. That's the key thing about it. The negativity that you bring, whether you went through something years ago, whether it's something that completely was out of your control, once you submit to the negative outlook, now the blood is on your hands. I can't save you. You have to be able to take responsibility for your outlook. Okay? And for my leaders and for the managers and the supervisors and the CEOs, if you can't be this person, then you will never get the absolute most out of any situation, any partnership, any employees, any vendors, if you do not address your inability to look inward. But there is hope. There is hope. And let me slow down for a minute, right? Because I get into it. There is hope. Okay? Now, we've taken everything out on the table. We've held ourselves accountable. We're looking inward. We've identified that moment where we were self-aware, and now we're trying to make that more of a present situation for ourselves. And if we can be self-aware and we can hold ourselves accountable, then I think that we are ready for the next step, right? But keep in mind, you can't go forward unless you deal with yourself, unless you're self-aware, unless you're accountable, okay? Now, we have beat ourselves down, right? I've made you guys look at yourself. I've made you guys say that it's your fault. I just made you feel like a terrible human being, right? I beat you down. And I had to be beaten down myself. But all things must be balanced in the universe. So with the same energy that I have asked you graciously to strip yourself down and really look at the negativity that you bring, the next step, you have to forgive yourself. Not to be confused with accepting toxic behavior, but you have to first forgive yourself. The title of of this thing is company culture as a means to success. And you see in quotations, this is the way that I look at things. Empathy for self as a means to empathy for others. You cannot approach a situation with empathy if you first are not empathetic to yourself. And that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't mean feeling sorry for yourself. The brand of empathy that I'm talking about is applied empathy, as explained by Mr. Michael Ventura in the book titled The Latter, Applied Empathy, that you have to approach your own shortcomings empathetically and judiciously. So you have to forgive yourself, and then you also have to hold yourself accountable. There's no way around it. But if you can become self-aware, if you can beat yourself down, and then you can say, you know what, those things happened to me, that made me do this, and now, I understand why I did these things, and I forgive myself, then we can move on to what we've already we've already discussed the first half of. I'm excited, right? Because you guys, you probably know it already, but congratulations, we have just accomplished the first half of emotional intelligence. And I want you guys to hug yourself, give yourself a round of applause, right? Emotional intelligence. What is that? That is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions and handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Now, the first half of that is being emotionally intelligent with your own emotions and your own triggers. You have to be the smartest person in the room. You cannot rely on someone else to interpret the leaders amongst us, right? I'm talking to leaders. You cannot allow someone else to interpret how the climate of the emotional state in any given situation. You have to be that person. Leader within the leaders amongst us, we are charged with having to be emotionally intelligent. I love this little slide, right? We're just gonna let this sit there as I explain, right? So there is two sides to every EQ, right? You have your personal competence, which we have accomplished through the first half of what we talked about: self-awareness, accountability, and forgiving yourself. And that is self-awareness and self-management. And then there's social competence. What may that be? Okay, now we can start to get into, once we've dealt with ourselves and we're healthy in our approach, now we can start to affect the rest of the culture. It doesn't matter what level you are. Doesn't matter what level you are. Now, let's dig into social competence, right? That's one's ability to understand other people's moods, behaviors, and motives in order to improve the quality of your personal relationships and business partnerships on every level. So now you are the subject matter expert as it pertains to self-awareness and accountability. So now you are charged with being able to infect the rest of the culture. And if we can, like I said, hold ourselves to that standard, now we can start, no matter what level you're on, no matter if you're on the ground level, as I was at one point, or if you're at the CEO level. If you're a leader within your organization, it will be easier to affect the company culture with this mindset. If we start to talk about being empathetic to the working styles of your colleagues and your employees and your vendors, and then empathetic to the needs of the customer, right? Because we all get angry sometimes when a customer blames us for something that we really had no control over, right? But we always know that the customer is right because we need their dollars. But what if you had a better understanding of yourself? Then you wouldn't even get angry. You would be more inclined to find a solution and meet people where they are. And that is the goal of this course, is to meet people where they are. And that's what I want to express in the second half of this seminar. And that is where we are. We have successfully completed the first half of company culture as a means to success because we first had to deal with ourselves. And the second half, which if I were to do this for you either remotely or in person, we would take a break and then we would come back and then we would start talking about empathy, and we would start talking about understanding, and then we would start talking about effective communication so that we can affect the bottom line, because that's what we're here for. We're all business people in this chat room. And so we want to be able to affect the bottom line. And I believe that if we can create a culture centered around those principles, we'll be able to begin to identify the people that need to go, the people that have potential, and the new leaders and the innovators within our organization. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. And at this point, I'm going to, I'm going to put a poll up, and I want you guys to get feedback, and then we're going to open up and we can, we can start the Q&A.